Alcatraz has always been more than concrete and cold water. It's been a riddle wrapped in razor wire, soaked in fog and legend. For decades, the world has stared at that jagged island in San Francisco Bay, asking the same question. Did they make it? Now, in 2025, a new twist has surfaced, one so precise, so calculated, it's turning old assumptions inside out. But don't expect a tidy ending. This isn't about heroes or villains. It's about shadows, science, and a silent night that still echoes with secrets. What really happened beyond those cell walls? And how close have we come, until now, to finally knowing? Inside America's most secure prison, Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary, often referred to simply as the Rock, stood as a symbol of the U.S. government's most extreme approach to incarceration. Located on a small island 1.25 miles off the coast of San Francisco, Alcatraz was originally a military fort during the 1850s, before being converted into a federal prison in 1934. Managed by the Federal Bureau of Prisons, it was designed to house inmates deemed too disruptive or dangerous for other facilities. From its inception, Alcatraz was intended to be the end of the line, a maximum security, minimum privilege institution for the most incorrigible offenders. The prison facility itself was a feat of engineering and security. The main cell house, constructed between 1910 and 1912, featured 4 blocks of cells, a dining hall, a hospital, a library, and administrative offices. The cells were small, bare, and built with tool-proof steel bars. Prisoners were counted up to 13 times a day, and the ratio of guards to inmates was the lowest in the nation. Metal detectors, tear gas canisters, and armed guards and elevated gun galleries enhanced security at every turn. Access to privileges like work, visitation, and even talking during meals had to be earned, making daily life both strict and psychologically taxing. With its inmate capacity of about 312, Alcatraz rarely got filled to that total. It accommodated some of the known worst criminals, Al Capone and Machine Gun Kelly. Super maximum offenders were dispatched to D Block, home to the Hole, some isolation cells infamous for inhumane conditions. It was a strictly racial segregation, with no rehabilitation intended, only control. There have been major upgrades in the functioning of the prison during its 29 years in operation, like the introduction of electrified fences, updated locking systems, and renovations to improve security in the 1930s and 40s. Alcatraz was closed down on March 21st, 1963, mainly because of the high cost of maintenance and the dilapidated state of the buildings, owing to weakening saltwater corrosion. And yet, it is this legacy that captures imagination. Today, managed by the National Park Service as a museum, it has more than 1 million yearly visitors. Refurbished areas provide an introduction to what used to be deemed the toughest penitentiary in the United States, a stronghold with a thin line separating punishment and survival often blurred. Its walls were strong, but its legend was even stronger, until one night changed everything. The myth of the inescapable rock. Alcatraz wasn't just a prison. It was a symbol, perched on a wind-battered island in San Francisco Bay. It came to represent the final word in American incarceration. Not just a place to serve time, Alcatraz was where the system sent inmates it had given up on. The prison's design, its isolation, and its relentless routines created a legend that escape was not only impossible, but unthinkable. That belief wasn't based on folklore. It was reinforced by statistics. Over its 29 years of operation, no one had ever been confirmed to have escaped. In 14 recorded attempts, most were captured or slain, with a few vanishing into the waters, presumed drowned. The treacherous tides, frigid temperatures, and sheer distance from shore made the bay itself an unbreachable final barrier. To attempt escape was, by most standards, to sign one's death warrant. This image, totally contained, was essential for Alcatraz. It was not just about locking people up. It was about annihilating any idea of escape. Guards, officials, and the public bought into the myth of the Rock being impossible to escape from, and that myth served the prison's power. That power came under stress in June 1962. Sometime between 10:30 and 11 p.m. on June 11, 1962, 3 inmates would get out of their cells and disappear. Frank Morris, John Anglin, and Clarence Anglin. The escape caused an introspection. The moment Alcatraz was said to be outfoxed even once, it was taken off its pedestal. The psychological aftershocks were immediate. Once there had been a fortress, Now there was only mystery. But this time, unlike others, the enigma lingered on. Now, the lack of a definite conclusion planted seeds of doubt, then fascination, and finally a tale grander than the prison itself. To this day, the 1962 escape is not merely an event. It is a fulcrum in the mythos of Alcatraz. The question of whether those men lived or died remains a mystery. What is known is that their very disappearance cracked America wide open from a myth she carried for decades. That crack in the rock allowed the legend to seep away. Frank Morris. The genius behind the plan, Frank Lee Morris, was far from an average inmate. He was a seasoned criminal with a brilliant mind and a history of escapes. The kind of man Alcatraz was specifically built to contain. Orphaned at age 11 and convicted by 13, Morris spent most of his youth moving between foster homes and institutions. His early life of instability hardened him, but also sharpened his instincts. With a criminal resume that included armed robbery, substance possession, and multiple successful escape attempts, Morris was transferred to Alcatraz in January 1960 after fleeing the Louisiana State Penitentiary. From the moment he arrived, he was already thinking about how he would leave. Once at Alcatraz, Morris was placed near fellow inmates John and Clarence Anglin, as well as Alan West, all of whom he had previously encountered during time served at other prisons. With their cells side by side, the men could whisper to each other at night, quietly forming what would become one of the most calculated escape teams in history. Morris naturally assumed the role of leader. His intelligence and prior experience escaping prison made him the architect of the plan that would ultimately shake the reputation of Alcatraz to its core. Unlike others who had tried and failed, Morris aimed for flawless execution. The group spent months hacking away at the salt damage of concrete beneath the vents under their sinks. They had stolen metal spoons, discarded saw blades, and homely built the drill powered by a vacuum cleaner to make holes in the deteriorating concrete material. Morris produced papier-mâché grills painted with stuff he stole from the library and maintenance shop to mask their activities. Even the sounds of their drilling had been dealt with. Morris played his accordion during music hour, using its wheezing sound to cover the noise from the digging activities. There is no improvisation here. Most definitely, there is planning, testimony that indeed Morris is tactically brilliant. The very act of breaking free was not merely a prison breakout, but rather a direct challenge to the myth of Alcatraz's invulnerability. By sewing together more than 50 raincoats into a 6-by-14-foot raft and life jackets, using hot steam pipes to seal the hunk of rubber, Morris and the Anglin brothers defied even gravity. They even converted a concertina into a makeshift air pump. They officially supposedly drowned, but no bodies were recovered. An 2013 letter contained some compelling evidence to the contrary. Whether Morris died in the bay or lived a secret life in hiding, his escape was undeniably the cleverest escape in Alcatraz's 30-year history, proving that even the rock could be cracked. The Anglin brothers John and Clarence Anglin were more than just two inmates serving time. They were brothers bound by hardship, loyalty, and a relentless desire to be free. Born into a poor farming family in rural Florida, they were part of a large brood of 13 siblings and grew up learning how to survive together. That bond of brotherhood became the foundation of their infamous escape from Alcatraz. Their lives of crime, mostly centered around bank robberies, landed them in the Atlanta Penitentiary, where their repeated escape attempts became such a problem that prison officials finally sent them to Alcatraz, the supposed end of the line for troublemakers. It was at Alcatraz that the Anglins were reunited with Frank Morris, whom they had met in an earlier stint behind bars. The brothers were placed in adjacent cells next to Morris and Alan West, which allowed them to communicate and collaborate covertly. With Morris as the brains of the operation, the Anglin brothers became indispensable hands in the escape effort. Over months, they helped dig holes through decaying concrete, using metal spoons and saw blades. While Morris led the engineering side of the plan, the Anglins worked on logistics and concealment, making papier-mâché vent covers to disguise the holes and gather materials from their prison labor assignments. That, too, basically, helped them in preparing the escape equipment for their escape. They had also helped Morris prepare the life jackets in one gigantic raft of 6 by 14 feet from more than 50 reused stolen raincoats. The hot steam pipes of the prison sealed rubber, while a modified concertina was used to inflate the raft into an air pump. Important 2. To know the daily activities of the prison and accessible materials through the factory system. But every movement they made was calculated. The course taken was carefully shielded from another well-built illusion, including the iconic dummy heads they helped sculpt from soap, toilet paper, and real hair swept from the barber shop floor. The events that followed their disappearance are among the most fascinating mysteries of American criminal history. Evidence has surfaced supporting the idea of the two brothers having lived even after the 1979 legal pronouncement of their deaths. Besides a 2013 letter claiming they had been hiding, there were alleged Christmas cards from the brothers confiscated, and even a 1975 picture that seemed to show them in Brazil. BBC interviewed prison officers and family reminisced about this incident as shocking and eerily quiet. There were no sounds, no alarm raised by night. If the Anglins survived, they pulled off not just a physical escape, but a psychological one, dimming out a prison made to be inescapable and out of even history itself. Crafting the illusion, the brilliance of the 1962 Alcatraz escape wasn't just in the digging or raft building. It was in the illusion. One of the key elements that allowed Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers to vanish undetected was the creation of eerily lifelike dummy heads. These decoys were so convincing that they fooled guards doing regular head counts. Sculpted from a bizarre mix of soap, toothpaste, and toilet paper, the heads were carefully molded to resemble sleeping inmates. The escapees painted them in flesh tones using art supplies stolen from the prison maintenance shop and topped them with real human hair, swept from the barbershop floor. These heads weren't just clever, they were critical. During nightly checks, guards didn't physically shake prisoners awake. They simply looked into cells for movement. The dummies, placed on the pillows and partially hidden under blankets, gave off the perfect illusion of slumber. To complete the deception, the escapees bundled clothes and towels beneath the sheets to mimic the shapes of sleeping bodies. The effect was so flawless that it wasn't until the morning roll call on June 12th that the guards realized something was wrong. By then, the trio had been gone for hours. Deception went beyond the dummy heads and included caverns extending into the walls. The prisoners used cardboard and papier-mâché, covers made from torn magazine pages from the prison library, to make holes that had been being dug for months. All the while the prisoners were camouflaging the holes. These fakes resembled the air vent grills at the back of their cells. These false grills blend well into the wall, hiding behind in the escape route, which hails gaping. The guards, peeking into the cells, would just see what would seem to be an absolutely normal sealed vent, where in reality, a tunnel to freedom waited behind. The more remarkable thing about the illusion is its resonance with the larger tradition of psychological warfare behind bars, the art of deception cultivated by desperate men in desperate places. In fact, all over the world, deceptions have aided in imprisonment breaks, from letters smuggled in hollowed-out books to false uniforms sewn from laundry scraps. Yet, few will compare the Alcatraz ruse in terms of detail and showmanship. The FBI agent who worked on the case, Michael Dyke, remarked, "They didn't just dig out, they rehearsed a performance, indicating that the escape involved the psychological as much as it did the physical. The escapees set a scene that beguiled not only the guards but the entire prison system. Their cells became a stage on that night, and for a few hours, the escapees were actors playing the ghostly role disappeared. But deception was only the beginning. The real escape began beneath the surface. Digging to freedom, the foundation of the Alcatraz escape plan, was literally carved into the crumbling infrastructure of the prison. Frank Morris, John and Clarence Anglin, and Alan West exploited a critical vulnerability: salt-damaged concrete behind the air vents beneath their sinks. Over several months, the men slowly chipped away at the weakened material, using tools that were as simple as they were ingenious. They stole metal spoons from the dining hall and repurposed discarded saw blades. Even more impressive was their homemade drill, crafted from a vacuum cleaner motor. Bit by bit, night after night, they carved escape tunnels that would open into an unguarded maintenance corridor. What made this feat possible was not brute force, but extreme patience and surgical precision. The men worked carefully to avoid detection, placing cardboard covers and papier-mâché vent grills over the holes during the day. These grills were painted to match the wall, using art supplies from the prison library, allowing them to blend in flawlessly with the surroundings. The escapees coordinated their digging to coincide with music hour, a daily period when instruments could be played. Morris's accordion, noisy and wheezy, masked the sound of scraping and drilling, transforming the cell block into a covert construction zone. Once the holes were large enough to crawl through, the escapees entered the unguarded corridor and went upstairs to an empty upper level of the prison, where they built a hidden workshop. Here, they stored materials and worked on other escape elements, the raft and paddles. Entering this section was made easier due to the deteriorating structure and lack of constant surveillance. Every inch they gained was earned through patience, coordination, and an extraordinary attention to detail.